We're going to call our committee of the whole meeting to order.
I move to adopt the agenda.
A second?
Proper moves and second to adopt the agenda. Are we voting on both of them?
Yep. Julie, you ready for us to vote on board docs?
Stephen?
No, if not, we can just take it by
Okay, that's fine.
verbal votes for now, and then,
It might be nice if we could do a whole meeting with board docs,
you know,
since
is it
we've
up and running?
been paying for it since July.
Stephen?
I think it's because it's log in.
Okay, motion passed, 6 yes. At this time now, we'll have the election of the committee of the whole chairperson. Recommend nominate Todd Garrett to be the committee of the chair.
A second?
Okay, you can vote at this time. Okay, motion passed, 5 yes, 1 abstention. Now, at this time, I'll turn this meeting over to Mr. Garrett.
Okay. I'm just staying in my seat over here.
Okay. Just take this.
I got it.
Got it.
Next item up is the approval of the minutes. Are there any changes that need to be made to that?
No.
Your second.
Motion and a second. All right, next, everybody's voted on that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's go pop up.
Okay, everybody's voted and it passed. The next item up is the Charleston Shared Future. Mr. Kennedy?
So we're going to provide an update to the school board and the community on the Shared Future Project. It's going to be done by two of the consultants with the Rios partners who are the facilitators of the project, Jackie McLemore and Leanne Willow.
Today, and to give a brief overview of the process that we've been undergoing with the members of the Charleston County community. And I wanted to just remind you that we're still in the process, that this is sort of a turning point, and that the final scenarios will be ready for the January 28th board presentation and the community presentation at that point. So we're still in the throes of this process. Next slide, Jackie. So Jackie McLemore, my colleague here, is coming to you here from Cleveland, and I'm coming to you from Stony Maine today. So we're really pleased to be here. So we just wanted to talk about these sort of 3 points, why transformative scenario planning, why we thought this might be a good process for Charleston County, the key elements in this process specific to Charleston, and then where we are now and the next steps moving forward. So first of all, and this is coming from the website for the project, that our purpose is really to increase community involvement, understanding, and support for improved educational outcomes for the students of the Charleston County School District by taking a systemic look at the current state of education in Charleston County and exploring possible future states. And I think it's important just to note that this is built on a number of the initiatives that you have already been involved with, the Charleston Study on Diversity and Inclusion, your strategic plan, the school construction plan, and we've referenced some other studies along the way, like the Avery study and really trying to build on and integrate a lot of the work that's already happened. So next slide. Great. So out of this project, the idea was to create a shared picture of factors that are shaping the current educational outcomes. What's causing Charleston County to be showing the achievement of their students and other factors affecting the current education. So we're looking at trying to build a shared understanding across the community and across the scenario team. And then to develop some possible futures. And these are not predictions, these are not absolutes, what's definitely going to happen, but some possible futures, in this case, 4 distinct scenarios about what could potentially happen in Charleston County based on different actions and different decisions that are taken as we move forward. To build the capacity for the community to work together while respecting and not just diminishing the current and historical differences of experience and perspective. And we've been doing a bunch of capacity building with the scenario team and really trying to build shared understanding of the many different perspectives and the many different both historical answers to the future, and really look at what's necessary in order for the community to be able to have respectful and conversations that really will help move the process forward. And then again, this opportunity to transform relationships by taking action together. So people who work together are generally speaking, they learn a lot about each other and are able to make a difference together. So the process itself starts with a bunch of different inputs, particularly a systemic orientation. So we're looking across the system. We're not looking at one particular part of the system. The school district is a microcosm of the larger Charleston County community. So we're looking at what needs to happen broadly in the system in order to cause what's happening now and what also can change. We looked at building a strong container, so a place where we can have really tough and difficult conversations with respect and ability to say the things that need to be said and to really listen so that new knowledge is created. And then finally, a rigorous process. So we've done scenario processes across the world and have done many of them in all different kinds of contexts. And we have a very rigorous process, as I think the scenario team will attest, that they were really put through their pieces over the 3 workshops, which Jackie will talk more about later. The steps in this process are to convene a team from across the whole system. So we had a team of 30 people who came together. We really stepped into what is happening both through the reports that I referenced earlier, but also first-hand reports, visiting schools, visiting different community members. We did dialogue interviews with a number of people to really flesh out our picture of what is happening in the system overall. Then we construct stories about what could happen, and this is not just making stuff up. It's really based on the data and based on what's going on in the society as we move forward. And through that, we can identify some leverage points. What are some places that we may be able to make a difference in the system, and either through the decisions that we make or the actions that we take, bring into being the kind of future that we really want to have happen for the children of Charleston County. And finally, actually take action. That this is not just a report that we're creating that's going to sit on a bookshelf somewhere. It's really to highlight and to identify actions that the community can take to really shift things so that we can close the achievement gap and better serve the students of Charleston County. So out of the process, we have we come out with some transformed understandings, with some shifted relationships, with people who would ordinarily, or the team would ordinarily have met. We call them sort of unlikely allies. So people that, because of who we are and where we live and work and play, we may not have run into each other, but those relationships really get built through this process. And we also have better ways of acting and a new tool set that will support the process. And finally, the last outcome is systemic transformation. So working together to create actions that we can transform the education system. And by education system, it's more broad than just Charleston County School District. It's really formal and informal education systems. So the scenarios that were created are actually stories about possible futures. And we're very rigorous about these kinds of stories. They have to be relevant. They have to illuminate the current circumstances and concerns. They have to make sense. Somebody from Charleston County could pick this up and say, "Oh I know that these stories are relevant because I see myself in them." They have to be challenging. We're trying to give people something to react to question what's currently happening, and to make some of the things that might not be seen necessarily on the surface more visible. They have to be plausible. They have to make sense. They have to be fact-based. They have to be logical. They're built on so that they can improve the systemic understanding of the system. And finally, the scenarios need to be clear. So they need to be distinct from one another. So when we finish this process, we'll have 4 very distinct scenarios that go in 4 different directions. So you can really tell them apart, and you can determine what the path is that would bring any one of those scenarios into being. And they have to be accessible and memorable. So we're spending time putting together a glossary. We're making sure that that everybody in the county can, or ideally everybody in the county will be able to read and understand or understand these scenarios. So and they make sense to them, and they evoke some sort of picture of what each of the scenarios will represent. And the way we went about constructing the scenarios is to, we looked at the concerns and questions that people were holding about the future. We brought those in a variety of different ways. The scenario team themselves, through dialogue interviews, through reading the newspapers, through a wide range of processes. And so we brought those in, and we cooked them, if you will. We sat up, we really looked at what was going on and what we want to learn from them. So we identified some driving forces. What were things that were already at play, that were structures in Charleston County that were causing us to see the outcomes that we were currently getting. Then we identified some uncertainties and certainties. And true certainties were things that in 2035, which was the timeline for these scenarios, what will happen between now and 2035, and what will Charleston County education look like in 2035. We identified things that would definitely be happening in 2035, and we identified those as certainties. And then we identified uncertainties. What were things that were going to happen, but we didn't necessarily know how they would happen. So it was, they were variables. So the certainties were going to appear in every scenario because they were essentially, factual, and we could count on those. The uncertainties were things that we thought would happen, but we weren't sure whether they would go up or down, or whether they, how they would appear was dependent on the rest of the story. And then we created these storylines. And after we sort of cooked all that, we converged into these 4 stories now. And we have 4 scenarios that are relevant, challenging, plausible, and clear. They've met those criteria. And that's what we'll be finishing up and presenting at the end of January. So, yeah, so these are the results and outcomes. So the understandings that are systemic, relationships among actors from across the system, an intention which takes the whole system into account, and then the capacities to actually create kinds of systemic change that we're looking for, and then actually some actions that will transform the system. Jackie?
So if we look at where we are now, Leanne just shared the overall transformative scenario planning process, and we're now at the point of acting to transform the system. And that can include any of the things that are listed here, holding individual, organizational, public meetings, disseminating the scenarios. Leanne just talked about the characteristics of the scenarios. So we're looking at what are the best ways to make the scenarios available to people across Charleston County. So certainly print is one of those, but there are a number of other ways that we can get the scenarios out. Launching spin-off initiatives, we're looking at that. That's likely to occur. The other thing that happens in the 4th phase, the active to transform the system, is cultivating this ongoing network of people who are ready to do some things in the community. When we talk about transforming relationships and creating networks, this is the reason that we do this. So the shared future process had 3 three-day workshops. The highlights of those workshops include, for workshop 1, that's when we did the capacity building in order to develop the relationships that we know are necessary to do the work. It also included understanding the current situation and understanding where there was the need to learn more about the current situation. In workshop 2, this involved learning more about the systems that produce educational outcomes. There were learning journeys. We had presentations from people who have deep experience and expertise in education. And in workshop 2, we began to develop the storylines and we began to work the scenario process that Leanne just laid out a couple of minutes ago. For workshop 3, we really had, in between these workshops, I should say, there was a lot of work occurring on refining, beginning to really amplify the storylines and to develop scenarios. By the time we got to workshop 3, that was the time to roll up our the scenarios. And part of that is that we had a +1 event. The purpose of that was to share the process and thinking while it was still being developed. One of the values and really part of the methodology that we have at Rio's Partners is really making clear the work that we're doing while we're working. We don't always wait until things are absolutely buttoned down and perfect before we begin to test them out and get some receptivity to them. So in workshops 1 through 3, when we were doing the scenario development, we relied on input from experiences in and outside the educational system. We have mentioned several times the dialogue interviews that we did. We did Part of the input was factoring in concerns about the education system, or systems really in Charleston, questions that were being asked, questions that were not being asked. Part of the input were structures that keep things the way that they are, certainties and uncertainties. We have referenced the time horizon for the scenarios is 2035, and then other input throughout the 3 workshops were the reference documents that we detailed elsewhere in the presentation. In this final workshop, workshop 3 is where we had the +1 event. Each scenario team member had the option to invite one person to a short session. We did this because we thought it would be beneficial to share the process and general storylines of the scenarios with a group of people who had not been involved and who would bring some fresh eyes to the work that was still ongoing. People who were invited were asked to share their wisdom, their coaching, and feedback for the scenario development process. The guests, we had a structure where the guests shifted amongst 4 tables were outlined. A bit about each of the 4 scenarios and provide some questions, thoughts, and perspectives. Their input was then taken into consideration in what we call the scenario editing process, which is still going on. Approximately 25 people attended the +1 event. The participants ranged from business people, we had several students. As you know, we had students who participated. So they brought in other students to hear and test and respond, nonprofit leaders, parents, superintendent Coachway, faith community leaders, and 3 CSD board members, a legislator, and many others participated in this small group. We got some really solid feedback and excellent questions as a result of their participation. Our next steps are to complete the scenarios documentation so that they can be widely shared. We're looking forward to the board presentation that we'll do with you on January 28th. And we're beginning to discuss events and ways to share the scenarios more widely. Action planning has begun. People are beginning to think about that. And we know that we need to continue to build capacity of students and scenario team members and other community members to actively engage in work that improves educational outcomes for Charleston County. So that's where we are now. We look forward to hearing your questions at this point.
Who has questions for him? Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not sure if you can hear me, Jackie or Lynn. Okay, great. Who amongst the board has questions of the workshops and what's going on so far? Go ahead, Ms. Coates.
So how does this correlate with the future planning we did at City Hall in 2016 with the former State Department of Education superintendent from Kentucky, and with the 3-day community-wide planning events that we did in 2016 and 17 with the company we hired then? And then how does this also correlate with the strategic plan and those actions and, for lack of a better word, plan scenarios? Where is that incorporated into your work?
And just before y'all start on that, I'm not even familiar with the workshops you're talking about. We were there?
Yeah, you were there.
I mean, but do you have, is this a rhetorical question or?
No, I'm serious. We had these workshops at City Hall, at North Charleston City Hall, and we came out with the scenarios and what we were going to do to transform the education. Then we hired the firm that, the first meeting was at Fish Downtown, then there were the meetings out at the restaurants in Mount Pleasant, and that had probably 50 or 60 community members, and it occurred over the course of several days.
Talking about our listening session?
No. And then these resulted in those action plans and the company, and I would assume that y'all had, we have this history of that work that's already been done. And then, of course, the strategic plan, which came out of the listening sessions. So how is your work correlated with them, and how is it necessary to add your work on top of that?
One of the things that we did in this process was we attempted to reference, to read, include, and share with scenario team members all of the different studies, research, and as we said, the strategic plan, and all of the other documentation that we listed so far. I wasn't familiar with the City Hall work as a separate piece of work. I think that's something that informed the strategic planning process, if I'm correct with that. And we also have brought in people from the community. The scenario team, as you know, included a broad cross-section of folks. So that's how we, especially in workshop 1, we identified and included the material, the processes from other efforts. We saw this as a way to build on and integrate. We don't have all the work that's been done in Charleston County. We know there's been a lot of it, and we certainly thought it was important to reference that and include that as part of the strategic plan, as part of the scenarios planning process. Leanne referred to the work that we did where we identified certainties, things that we know, as well as uncertainties. That was part of the work, a matrix that was developed in workshop 1 and continue to be refined in workshop 2. That will be included in the scenario documentation. And in listing those certainties and uncertainties, that includes information that came from all of those other sources.
Okay, and Mrs. Breuer, go ahead.
So I just comment to Mrs. Coach's point, adding another data point to how we got here. So the meetings at Patriots Point, those meetings which you referred to, I can't comment on the meetings from North Charleston, but the ones we had at Patriots Point and the listening sessions we had downtown at Burke High School, those two sessions and multiple sessions led to the strategic plan.
Right.
That was part of the strategic plan.
Okay, so, okay. And those citizens and all there, were they included in this, or is that work for them done, and these are a new group of other citizens? Do they correlate?
So I would defer to Mr. Kennedy or the group here to talk about the
There's
selection
probably, what,
of members of the team.
75 members of the public and community leaders in those groups?
30.
So Mr. Kennedy, you can comment
No,
on
I'm
how you
not
selected the
the other-
individuals for this
The other
group.
ones were huge. Now, I'm sorry I don't remember the names. I sort of assumed that would be in the report, that if it was building up, it would have referenced how we got here.
So the intent, when we come out of the scenarios at the end of January, is to begin to engage literally thousands of people across the county. So that would include those who historically have been involved over the last 2 or 3 years that helped develop the strategic plan, which was incorporated into the Share Future project. And so the intent is to build upon those things that have happened not only in the last 2 or 3 years, but actually going back at least 20 years, a number of different reports that I've seen, the Share Future team has seen. And so the folks that were involved in 2016, those ones that are still have an interest in being active in this process will be reached out to, and hopefully we can get a number of them to be participants.
We're coming up on the end of when this is scheduled to be over. What other questions do we have? Go ahead, Mr. Holliday.
So, Mr. Kennedy, in your overall scope of this Shared Future project, you're wanting to engage Charleston County as a whole. What are you trying to achieve and helping the achievement gap, or what is your final outcome? So
as the presenters mentioned in the presentation, the intent is to improve the educational outcome of our students. We just saw the report cards that came out from the state recently, I think last week. So there are some outcomes that are not not good. We want to make sure that in 2035, between now and that time period, that we have a system that's put in place that ensures that opportunities are available for all of our children to have positive outcomes coming through our school system.
And I just heard a little bit about the Rios group, but my question would be again for next year, not today. There's a segment of the community, I guess, was involved in your experiment or group. You're going to have to reach a lot of folks that have not been included, that maybe have different ways of doing things, different thought patterns in that segment of the community. That's something y'all would have to think about, how you're going to achieve that goal.
I agree.
Go ahead, Ms. Coates.
Right, and this is a short question, but during your session where you gathered the wisdom and coaching and feedback of the various community members, I think one of the questions that we would have is, why was North Charleston's board members the only board members not included in that?
I can answer that. The scenario team itself was set up back in September. Michael Miller and I were both invited because we were the two people not running from, or we were two board members who were not running for re-election and knew would be here, start, middle, and finish. With, and I don't know anything beyond that. And
So I think the session Mrs. Coates is referring to is
the final session.
Right,
Was
So-
she referenced.
Yeah.
If I may,
Just seems a little, our school, it seems like we've got 13 of the schools that will be most affected by this scenario planning. And while it's an understanding that you know, some board members were invited and that's fine and all of that, but when you have the area that is most affected, I would think that
You have more participation.
before the final product is to be given to us.
Yeah, it was a 30-member workshop that required 9 full days of 12-hour
No, I'm not
days.
asking about the workshops.
So the +1 was, no kidding, a +1. I didn't have a +1. The other board members were invited by somebody else. And that was, again, the whole purpose of it was not to come up with, we're going to do A, B, and C, but it's part of the formalizing the different shared scenarios so that you got feedback, okay, these are things you didn't think about. And with
Right.
respect to the 30 and it was a cross-section. There were, Mr. Askew and I were two, either current or former board members. There were people from charter schools, people from public schools, people.
You had,
I was invited,
right, we had a board member from East Cooper.
I was invited
downtown.
by Craig Ashton.
Right. East
again-
Cooper, downtown, West Ashley, and the rural islands. We had every
I'll
geographical
take my
area.
60 hours back if you
Well-
want to come back.
So-
Because it was a completely volunteer thing. And again, this is to get input, to come up with different scenarios. This process has been done in South Africa. It's been done in Colombia.
Oh, I know.
It's been done in
I have a
Mexico.
Colombian stepdaughter. I was there when Rios was doing
With,
this.
so the point is to come up with, we're Charleston County, where are you? If you keep doing more of the same, what does that scenario look like? If you do something massively different, what would that look like? What are all the different elements? Not just the board has a small function to play in that, but there are a lot of things we can't do without state delegation participation. There are a lot of things we can't do. This board obviously has the will to do our status quo right now, but we
I
can't
think
do
the fact that this board
a lot.
unanimously approved him moving forward with Rios means that we already all agree with everything you're saying. That wasn't my
Got it,
question.
go ahead.
I feel like as a board member, I represent the entire county and not just my area. And I know that there were people, community people from North Charleston at the meeting, because I spoke to some of them. And I see this more as a community effort, which I think Charleston needs, is more of a community effort as opposed to a board effort, with information for us and from us. But that's how I see it. And I also feel like I represent all 50,000 kids, not just kids living in my part of town.
Okay, and if we
I
can
do think
direct
that's
the
right.
rest of our questions, go ahead to the two who we've got on a limited time basis.
I was invited, but uninvited, so.
And again, the issue there was we were hitting a quorum and didn't want it to be a.
Bingo, there was consideration.
But
Yeah,
you-
yeah. Because, yeah, go ahead.
No, but, and piggybacking off of Cindy, the biggest impacted area, like she said, is in our district. So again, the thought pattern, the community concerns that help our children move forward should be more inclusive in that particular project. But you know, if you're going to impact education in the long run, you're going to have to figure out how to be more inclusive of those who just necessarily want at that table. That's all.
Go ahead.
So I think you all said you have a full presentation that you'll do to the board in January.
Right, the correct
Yeah,
version.
yes.
Okay. And so the board, all 9 of us will have equal opportunity at that point to give any feedback or, you know, I mean, this
Absolutely.
project isn't going
Yeah.
forward without approval and support of the full board, correct?
So on January 28th, Rios will be here in town. We will make a presentation to the board and to the community. And so then this is when we begin our work in terms of trying to expand this far beyond the 30 team members. That will include the entire county, all portions of it.
Okay, great.
All right. Here, no other questions. The next item up. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Jackie and Dan.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
The next item up is we're going into executive session. We have a motion to do that.